There are moments in life when you don't feel strong, you don't feel bold, you don't feel unshakable. Instead, you feel fragile, like even a few careless words can tear you apart inside. You smile on the outside, but deep down, you're carrying wounds that nobody sees. Words spoken in anger, words spoken in jealousy, words spoken without thinking, they echo in your mind long after they were said, and you begin to believe them. You begin to feel like maybe they're true. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I really am a failure. Maybe I'll never rise above this. And before you know it, the voices around you become louder than the truth within you. But listen carefully. Just because something was said to you doesn't mean it was sent by God. Not every voice deserves authority over your identity. You may feel weak, but your weakness is not your end, it's your invitation. It's an invitation for God to step in with His strength, because when you are weak, that's when His power shows up the clearest. The problem is not that people speak. People will always speak. The problem is when their words take root in your heart and begin to define you. You start living based on what they said instead of what God says. And God says something very different. God says you are chosen even when others reject you. God says you are loved even when others hurt you. God says you have purpose even when others try to reduce you. So why are you giving so much power to voices that didn't create you? The one who created you is the only one who has the right to define you. Yes, people's words can hurt. They can cut deep, but they only destroy you if you agree with them. If you take those words, hold on to them, and replay them over and over, they become chains. But today you have a choice. You can keep carrying the weight of what they said, or you can release it and receive what God says. You don't have to fight every voice. You just have to choose the right one to listen to. Because strength is not the absence of weakness. Real strength is knowing where to go when you are weak. And when you go to God, honestly, broken and real, He doesn't push you away. He meets you there. He lifts you. He reminds you that your value was never in their words to begin with. So yes, you may feel weak right now. Yes, words may have hurt you deeply, but you are not defined by what broke you. You are defined by the one who can restore you, and God is not finished with you yet. Not every voice that speaks into your life has the right to shape who you are, yet many people live as if every opinion carries equal authority. That's where the struggle begins. Someone said something negative, careless, or even cruel, and instead of letting it pass, it settles deep inside your heart. It begins to echo in your thoughts, and over time it starts to influence how you see yourself. But the truth is, authority is not given automatically just because words are spoken. Authority is granted by agreement. Every day you are surrounded by voices. Some are external friends, family, coworkers, strangers, even social media. Others are internal, the thoughts you replay, the doubts you entertain, the fears you nurture. The danger is not simply that these voices exist, but that you may unknowingly give them permission to sit on the throne of your identity. You start letting temporary opinions make permanent impressions on your soul. People will speak from their own pain, their own insecurity, their own limited understanding. Sometimes they project their struggles onto you. Sometimes they speak out of jealousy, sometimes out of anger, and sometimes without even realizing the damage they're causing. But their condition does not determine your identity. Just because someone is loud doesn't mean they are right. Just because something is repeated doesn't mean it is true. You have to understand that identity is not something that should be built on shifting voices. If your sense of worth depends on what people say, then it will rise and fall based on their moods, their opinions, and their approval. One day you'll feel strong because someone praised you, and the next day you'll feel broken because someone criticized you. That kind of life is unstable, and it keeps you emotionally exhausted, always trying to please voices that were never meant to define you in the first place. The deeper issue is not the words themselves, but the weight you give them. When you accept a negative word without question, you allow it to plant a seed. That seed begins to grow into doubt, insecurity, and fear. It starts shaping your decisions. You hesitate when you should move forward. You stay silent when you should speak. You hold back when you should step out. All because a voice that had no authority was given control. But authority belongs to the source. The bit belongs to the source. The one who created something is the one who defines it. A product does not determine its own purpose, and strangers do not get to rewrite its design. In the same way, your identity is not something that can be rewritten by opinions. It was established by a higher source, and that truth remains constant no matter what anyone says. You have to become more selective about what you allow into your spirit. Not every comment deserves your attention. Not every criticism deserves your reflection. Some words are simply noise, and if you treat noise like truth, you will lose clarity about who you are. Discernment becomes your protection. You begin to ask yourself, does this align with truth, or is this just someone's perspective? That question alone can stop a lot of damage before it starts. There is also power in silence, not the silence of weakness, but the silence of wisdom. You don't have to respond to every voice. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to engage with words that are not rooted in truth. When you start giving attention to the wrong voices, you start starving them of influence. At the same time, you must replace those voices with something stronger. You cannot simply remove negativity without filling that space with truth. If you leave your mind empty, those same voices will come back even louder. But when you intentionally focus on what is true, what is life-giving, and what builds you up, you begin to rewire how you think. You begin to stand firmer, not because people stop talking, but because you stop listening to the wrong ones. This is a daily decision. It's not something you fix once and never deal with again. Every day you will hear something that could shake you if you let it, but every day you also have the choice to decide which voices deserve a seat in your mind and which ones need to be shut out. Over time, that choice becomes a habit, and that habit becomes strength. You are not responsible for what people say, but you are responsible for what you accept. You cannot control every word that comes your way, but you can control whether it stays or leaves. And when you begin to live with that understanding, something changes inside you. You stop being easily broken by words, not because they stopped coming, but because they lost their authority over you. Weakness is often seen as something to hide, something to be ashamed of, something that disqualifies you from stopping. Being strong, you look at your struggles, your emotional wounds, the way words affect you, and you start to feel like you're lacking something everyone else seems to have. You compare your sensitivity to someone else's toughness and conclude that you're somehow less. But what if weakness is not a sign of failure? What if it is actually an opening, a doorway through which something greater can enter your life? The reality is strength that comes from yourself has limits. You can only hold yourself together for so long. You can only ignore the pain, suppress the hurt, and push through the pressure for a certain amount of time before something begins to crack. And when that moment comes, when you feel like you can't carry it anymore, it's easy to think you've reached the end. But that breaking point is not the end. It's the place where reliance shifts. Weakness has a way of exposing what strength tries to hide. It reveals the areas where you are not in control, where your own ability is not enough. And while that can feel uncomfortable, even frightening, it is also deeply necessary, because as long as you believe you can handle everything on your own, you leave no room for God to move in your life. Self-sufficiency can quietly replace dependence, and before you realize it, you're trying to fight spiritual battles with human strength. When you finally admit, I can't do this on my own, something powerful happens. That confession is not defeat. It is alignment. It aligns you with the truth that opens the door for divine strength. Because God's power is not designed to assist your strength, it is designed to meet you in your weakness. It doesn't compete with your ability. It completes what you lack. Think about the moments when words hurt you the most. It's not just the words themselves, but the vulnerability behind them. It's the part of you that feels exposed, the part it doesn't know how to defend itself. The part that absorbs the impact instead of deflecting it. That vulnerability is often where you feel the weakest. But it is also where transformation begins. If you allow it, instead of running from your weakness, you can bring it honestly before God. Not dressed up, not hidden, not explained away, just real. I'm hurt. I feel broken. I don't have the strength to ignore this. That kind of honesty is not something God rejects. It is something he responds to. Because you're no longer pretending to be strong. You're creating space for real strength to enter. The problem is many people want God's strength without acknowledging their weakness. They want to feel powerful, but they don't want to feel dependent. They want to overcome, but they don't want to admit they're overwhelmed. And that tension keeps them stuck because divine strength flows through surrender, not through pride. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving over. It's saying, I release my need to control this, and I trust you to handle what I cannot. That shift changes everything. The pressure to hold yourself together begins to lift. The need to prove something begins to fade. The need to prove something begins to fade. You stop striving to be unbreakable and start learning how to be supported. When God's strength begins to work in your weakness, it doesn't always remove the situation immediately. People may still speak, challenges may still come, but something inside you changes. You become less shaken, not because life got easier, but because you're no longer standing on your own. There is a quiet stability that starts to form within you, a strength that doesn't come from your circumstances, but from your connection to something greater. Over time, the very areas that once made you feel weak begin to produce resilience. Not a hard, defensive kind of strength, but a steady, grounded kind. You don't CT as quickly, you don't internalize everything as deeply. You still feel, but you're not overwhelmed by every word. That's not because you became naturally stronger. It's because you learned how to draw from a different source. There is also a deeper purpose in this process. Your weakness not only invites strength into your life, but it also shapes your character. It teaches humility, patience, and compassion. It allows you to understand others who are hurting because you know what it feels like to be there. What once felt like a liability becomes a place of growth, a place where something meaningful is being built within you. So instead of asking, why am I so weak? The question begins to change. It becomes, what can God do through this weakness? That shift in perspective opens your eyes to possibilities you couldn't see before. You realize that your weakness is not a barrier. It is a bridge between your limitations and God's limitless power. And as you continue to walk through life, facing words, challenges, and moments that test you, you begin to carry a different kind of confidence. Not confidence in your own ability to withstand everything, but confidence in knowing that you don't have to. You know where to go. You know who to rely on. And that makes all the difference. Words have power, but they do not have control unless you hand it over. That's the hidden truth many people overlook. It's not the existence of hurtful words that shapes your life the most. It's your agreement with them. The moment you accept a negative word as truth, it begins to move from something spoken around you to something living inside you. And once it lives inside you, it starts influencing how you think, how you feel, and how you act. At first, it may seem small. Someone makes a comment, maybe in passing, maybe in frustration, and it hits a sensitive place. You feel the sting, but you try to brush it off. Yet later, when you're alone, that same sentence comes back. You replay it in your mind. You analyze it. You begin to wonder if there's some truth to it. That's the moment where a choice is being made, not consciously, but internally. You're deciding whether that word will pass through you or settle within you. When you allow it to settle, it doesn't stay as just a sentence. It becomes a belief. And beliefs are powerful because they shape perception. Once a belief is formed, you begin to see everything through its lens. If someone once called you not good enough, you may start interpreting neutral situations as confirmation of that idea. A small mistake suddenly feels like proof. A delay feels like rejection. Silence from others feels like judgment. The belief begins to rewrite your reality. This is how words gain control, not by force, but by agreement. They don't need to shout forever. They only need to be accepted once. After that, your own mind starts doing the work, repeating the message, reinforcing it and building it deeper into your identity. What started as someone else's voice becomes your inner voice. And the most dangerous part is that once it becomes internal, it feels true. You don't even question it anymore. You operate from it. It affects your confidence, your decisions, and even your willingness to try. You hold back not because you lack ability, but because you've accepted a limitation that was never meant to define you. But the same way agreement gives words power, rejection removes it. You have the ability to interrupt that process. When a negative word comes your way, you can choose to challenge it instead of absorbing it. You can ask yourself, is this actually true, or is this just someone's opinion? That question creates space. It stops the automatic acceptance and gives you a moment to decide what stays and what goes. This doesn't mean words won't hurt. Pain is real. And emotional wounds are not something you can simply ignore, but there is a difference between feeling the impact of a word and building your identity around it. You can acknowledge the hurt without accepting the message. You can say, that hurt me, without saying, that defines me. That distinction is where your freedom begins. It also requires awareness of your internal dialogue. Because even after you reject a negative word externally, it may try to resurface internally. Your mind may bring it back, especially in moments of weakness or doubt. That's when you have to be intentional. You have to replace that thought with something stronger, something rooted in truth. If you don't replace it, it will try to reclaim its place. This is not a one-time decision, it's a process. There will be moments when you catch yourself believing something negative again. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're becoming aware, and awareness gives you the power to change direction. Each time you reject a false belief, you weaken its hold. Each time you choose truth over negativity, you strengthen your foundation. Over time, something shifts. The same words that once would have shaken you begin to lose their effect. Not because people stop speaking, but because you stopped agreeing. You no longer give immediate access to every opinion. You filter what you hear, you weigh it, you decide whether it aligns with truth before allowing it to take root. There is also a growing sense of stability that comes with this. When your identity is no longer built on external voices, you become less reactive. You're not easily lifted by praise or crushed by criticism. You begin to stand on something deeper, something more consistent than human opinion. That stability protects you, not from hearing words, but from being controlled by them. At its core, this is about reclaiming authority over your inner world. You cannot control everything that is said around you, but you can control what is allowed to shape you. And when you take that responsibility seriously, you begin to live differently. You move with more confidence, not because no one speaks against you, but because their words no longer carry the same weight. The power of words is real, but it is not absolute. It depends on your response. And when you understand that, you begin to see that you are not as fragile as you once thought. You are not at the mercy of every voice. You have the ability to decide what becomes part of you and what remains outside of you. And that decision changes everything. There is a constant battle happening within you, whether you realize it or not. It's not always visible and it's not always loud, but it is always present. It is the battle between truth and opinion, between what God says about you and what people say about you, and what people say about you. And the outcome of that battle determines how you live your life. The problem is, many people have allowed the wrong voice to take the lead. And as a result, they are living beneath who they were created to be. People's opinions are loud, they come quickly, often without thought, and they carry emotion. When someone speaks negatively, it can feel immediate and intense. It hits your feelings, and because it touches something personal, it becomes hard to ignore. On the other hand, God's truth is often quieter. It requires you to slow down, to listen, to reflect. It doesn't force itself on you and invite you. And because of that, many people unintentionally give more attention to opinions than to truth. But volume does not determine validity. Just because something is louder doesn't mean it is more accurate. Just because it comes quickly doesn't mean it is right. If you see your identity on what is loudest, you will constantly be pulled in different directions. One person's praise may lift you up, while another person's criticism brings you down. You become emotionally unstable, not because you are weak, but because your foundation is inconsistent. God's truth, however, is steady. It does not change based on circumstances, moods, or people's perspectives. It remains the same even when everything else shifts. The challenge is learning how to make that truth louder in your life than the noise around you. That doesn't happen automatically. It requires intention. You have to choose what you focus on. Your mind naturally holds on to what you repeat. If you keep replaying negative words in your thoughts, they will grow stronger. They will begin to shape your outlook, your confidence, and your expectations. But if you intentionally focus on what God says, if you remind yourself of truth consistently, those truths begin to take root instead. This is why what you feed your mind matters so much. If your mind is constantly filled with criticism, comparison, and negativity, then those things will dominate your thinking. But if you begin to fill your mind with truth about your worth, your purpose, your identity, then something begins to shift. You start to think differently, and when your thinking changes, your life begins to follow. It's not about ignoring reality or pretending that words don't hurt. It's about choosing which reality has the final say. You may hear something negative, and it may affect you emotionally, but that doesn't mean it gets to define you. Truth has to become your anchor. When everything else tries to pull you away, truth holds you steady. There will be moments when opinions seem convincing. They may align with your fears or your past experiences, making them feel even more real. But feelings are not always reliable indicators of truth. Just because something feels true doesn't mean it is true. That's why you cannot rely only on how you feel. You must also rely on what you know. Making God's truth louder is not about a single moment of decision. It is about daily practice. It is about what you tell yourself when no one else is speaking. It is about what you believe when you are alone with your thoughts. It is about what you choose to meditate on when your mind begins to wander. Those small, consistent choices build a strong inner foundation. Over time, as truth becomes more rooted in you, you will notice a change in how you respond to people's words. The same comments that once would have shaken you will begin to lose their impact. You may still hear them, but they won't carry the same weight. Not because you have become insensitive, but because you have become grounded. You begin to evaluate words instead of absorbing them. Instead of immediately believing what is said, you measure it against truth. If it aligns, you receive it. If it doesn't, you let it go. That process protects your identity. It keeps you from being shaped by every passing opinion. There is also a confidence that comes from this alignment. Not a loud, arrogant confidence, but a quiet, steady one. You are no longer desperate for approval because your sense of worth is no longer dependent on it. You are no longer easily discouraged by criticism because you have something deeper to stand on. This doesn't mean people will stop speaking. Opinions will always exist. There will always be voices trying to define you, limit you, or question you. But when God's truth is louder in your life, those voices lose their influence. They may still be heard, but they are no longer followed. And that is where real freedom begins. Not when the voices around you disappear, but when the truth within you becomes stronger than the noise around you. Strength is often misunderstood. Many people think strength means having no emotions, showing no cracks, and never being affected by anything or anyone. They believe that if you are strong, words shouldn't hurt you. Situations shouldn't get to you. So when they feel overwhelmed, when words cut deep, or when they struggle internally, they assume they must be weak. But real strength does not come from pretending you are unaffected. Real strength is revealed in where you go when you are affected. There will always be moments when life feels heavier than you expected, Words from others may hit sensitive areas. Situations may drain you. You may try to handle it on your own at first, telling yourself to just push through, to ignore it, to be tougher. But eventually you reach a point where you realize that ignoring pain does not remove it. Suppressing emotions does not heal them. Carrying everything alone only makes the weight heavier. That moment when you recognize that you cannot do it all by yourself is not a moment of failure. It is a moment of flurry. It is where you begin to understand that strength is not about self-reliance, but about right reliance. It's about knowing where to turn when your own resources run out. Many people turn to distractions instead of direction. They try to escape the pain rather than address it. Some bury themselves in work, others in entertainment, others in isolation. They do anything to avoid feeling what they are feeling. But avoidance is not strength. It only delays the process. The pain remains waiting to surface again, often stronger than before. Real strength chooses a different path. It does not run from the pain. It brings the pain to the right place. It acknowledges the hurt and takes it to God honestly, not with perfect words, not with a polished image, but with sincere. It is, this hurt me. I feel broken. I don't understand why this affects me so much. That kind of openness is not weakness. It is courage, turning to God, and weakness requires humility. It means letting go of the need to appear strong all the time. It means admitting that you need help beyond what you can provide for yourself. And in a world that often celebrates independence above everything else, that kind of dependence can feel uncomfortable. But it is in that dependence that true strength is found. Because when you turn to God, you are not just expressing your pain, you are positioning yourself to receive something greater. You are opening your heart to peace that does not come from circumstances, to strength that does not come from within yourself, and to comfort that goes deeper than temporary relief. It doesn't always happen instantly, but there is a gradual shift. The weight begins to lift, the tension begins to ease. The storm may still be around you, but it is no longer controlling you. This kind of strength is steady, not sudden. It grows over time as you continue to turn in the right direction. Each time you choose to go to God instead of shutting down, you build resilience. Each time you are honest instead of hiding, you grow stronger internally. It may not look dramatic from the outside, but inside something solid is being formed. You also begin to recognize patterns. You notice how your first reaction used to be to internalize everything, to let words define your mood and your mindset. But now there's a pause, a moment where you catch yourself and decide not to stay there. You choose to shift your focus. You choose to pray instead of replaying the hurt. You choose to release instead of holding on. This does not mean you will never struggle again. There will still be days when you feel weak, when words affect you more than you would like. But the difference is you now know what to do in those moments. You are not lost in them. You are not controlled by them. You have a direction, and that direction creates stability. It keeps you from being tossed around by every emotional wave. You may feel the impact, but you are not carried away by it. There is something anchoring you, something holding you steady, even when everything else feels uncertain. Over time, this becomes part of who you are. You become someone who does not rely solely on personal strength, but on a deeper connection. Someone who does not deny weakness, but knows how to handle it. Someone who does not break under pressure, not because the pressure disappeared, but because you are no longer carrying it alone. That is what real strength looks like. It is not loud and it is not always visible, but it is powerful. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that no matter what comes your way, you have somewhere to go. And that makes all the difference. Pain has a way of changing how you see yourself if you're not careful. When people speak words that wound you deeply, especially repeatedly, those words don't just stay as memories. They begin to form a lens. Through that lens, you start interpreting your life, your worth, and your future. What was once a moment of hurt slowly becomes a mindset. And before you realize it, you're no longer just dealing with pain, you're living from it. There is a difference between experiencing pain and becoming shaped by it. Experiencing a pain is unavoidable. Words will hurt, situations will disappoint, and people will fail you at times. But being shaped by pain is something that happens over time when it is left unprocessed, unchallenged, and unhealed. It begins to define your reactions, your expectations, and your identity. When pain is left unchecked, it often turns into self-protection. You start building walls, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. You become more guarded, less open, and more cautious about trusting others. You may tell yourself that you're just being careful, but deep down, it's the pain trying to prevent itself from being felt again. The problem is, while those walls may keep some hurt out, they also keep growth, connection, and freedom from coming in. Another way pain shapes you is through limitation. Words that once hurt you begin to set boundaries around what you believe you can do. If someone told you that you're not capable, you may hesitate to take opportunities. If someone made you feel small, you may shrink yourself in situations where you should stand tall. Pain convinces you to play safe, to avoid risk, to stay in places where you won't be exposed again. But in doing so, it also keeps you from stepping into your potential. There is also the internal dialogue that forms from pain. It's no longer just about what others said. It's about what you now say to yourself. The criticism you heard becomes the voice in your head. The doubt others planted becomes your own doubt. And because it's coming from within, it feels even more real. You may not even realize that your thoughts are rooted in past wounds rather than present truth. But pain was never meant to have that kind of authority in your life. It was never meant to define you, limit you, or silence you. It is something you experience, not something you become. And in order to break free from its influence, you have to be willing to confront it instead of carrying it quietly. Confronting pain does not mean reliving every detail or staying stuck in what happened. It means acknowledging that it affected you and refusing to let it control you any longer. It means being honest about where you were hurt and how it changed you so that you can begin to separate yourself from it. You start to see that what happened pinned to you is not who you are. This process also requires intentional renewal of your thinking. You cannot continue to think from a place of pain and expect to live in freedom. If your thoughts are still shaped by past wounds, your present will continue to reflect them. That's why it becomes necessary to challenge those thoughts. When a limiting belief arises, you question it. When a limiting belief arises, you question it. When a negative assumption forms, you examine it. You don't just accept everything your mind tells you, especially when it has been influenced by hurt. As you do this consistently, something begins to shift. The grip of pain starts to loosen. The things that once triggered strong reactions begin to lose their intensity. You may still remember what happened, but it no longer controls how you see yourself. You begin to reclaim parts of yourself that were hidden under layers of hurt. There is also a transformation that happens when pain is handled the right way. Instead of making you smaller, it begins to make you wiser. You become more aware, more discerning, and more grounded. You don't ignore red flags anymore, but you also don't assume the worst in every situation. You find a balance between being open and being wise. Pain can also deepen your compassion. When you've been hurt, you gain an understanding of what others might be going through. You become less quick to judge and more willing to listen. What once felt like a weakness begins to develop into strength, not because the pain was good, but because it was handled in a way that produced growth instead of damage. Letting go of pain's control does not happen overnight. It is a process that requires patience, consistency, and a willingness to move forward even when it's uncomfortable. There will be moments when old feelings try to return, when old thoughts try to resurface, but each time you choose not to go back, you reinforce your fresh. Edom, you begin to realize that while pain was part of your story, it is not the author of it. It does not get to decide how your life turns out. You have the ability to move beyond it, to grow through it, and to become someone who is no longer defined by what once tried to break you. There comes a point where you have to make a decision about what you are going to carry and what you are going to release. Life will hand you many things, some good, some painful, some confusing, and not everything you receive is meant to stay with you. Yet, many people move through life holding on to words, experiences, and emotions that were never meant to be permanent. They carry them from one season to the next, allowing yesterday's wounds to shape today's reality. Holding on can feel natural, especially when something has affected you deeply. When words hurt you, when people disappoint you, when situations leave you feeling broken, your instinct may be to replay it, to analyze it, to keep it close so you don't forget. Part of you may even believe that holding on protects you, that it keeps you aware and prevents you from being hurt again. But in reality, holding on often keeps you stuck in the very place you're trying to move beyond. What you carry eventually begins to carry you. If you hold on to pain long enough, it will start influencing your thoughts, your emotions, and your decisions. Your decisions, it becomes a weight that slows you down. You may want to move forward, but something keeps pulling you back. Not physically, but mentally and emotionally. You find yourself revisiting the same thoughts, the same conversations, the same feelings. And without realizing it, you are living in a loop created by what you refuse to release. Releasing is not about pretending something didn't happen. It's not about ignoring the impact or acting like it didn't hurt. Releasing is about deciding that what happened. People will not control what happens next. It is a conscious choice to let go of the weight, even if the memory remains. You acknowledge it, but you don't carry it. One of the reasons releasing is difficult is because it feels like losing control. When you hold on to something, it can give you a sense of certainty, even if it's painful. You know what happened, you understand the hurt, and in a strange way, it becomes familiar. Letting go requires stepping into the unknown. It requires trusting that you can move forward without constantly looking back. And that kind of trust does not come easily. There's also the emotional attachment to what you've carried. Sometimes pain becomes part of your identity. You begin to define yourself by what you've been through, by what